rice cookers. Welcome back. In today's episode, today we'll be finally getting the all-wheel drive K-swap package into the RD1. So let's get stuck into it. Got the steering rack back. As you can see, the lines wrap pretty tidily along the back there and then up. Now we're going to have to test this rear mount out because this is probably going to be pretty close. So hopefully I didn't make a mistake there in not giving those measurements. So let's check it out. That's very close. There's a very small gap, probably like 2 or 3 millimeters, but because all of this is fixed, it's not really anything to worry about. Brian at Hasport's recommended lifting this 10 millimeters, spacing this whole thing up. Something to do with the all-wheel drive setup, but I can't understand why. Just gone and reviewed my question on the VTech Academy live stream, so thanks a lot to Brian and everyone over there for answering it. It has to do with the rear mount on the swap for the RD1. Now, on the RD1, the subframe the mounting point for the subframe on the chassis itself is lower than in an EK by about, I think he said 4/10 of an inch, which is 10 millimeters in metric, which means that this whole setup will be slightly lower in this chassis compared to an EK Civic chassis. So that's why he recommends spacing this whole thing up about 10 mil. So this is tenths, so that 4/10 of an inch is what we need for spacing, which is the same. See if we can get that to focus. 4/10, 1 centimeter. We'd end up with around about 5 mil of thread. So I might have to change these bolts if I'm going to space this 4/10 or 10 mil. Found these out of the parts bin. They are, I believe they're for the lower fork on an EG. Same thread pitch, and it's going to give me the extra length in this area for this 10 mil piece of alloy that I found. I'll space that up like that apparently, and then that'll give me the reach to grab thread. So let's make a spacer out of this chunk of metal. Need 3 of them. So I've just got this marked out into 3 sections. I'll cut these into squares and then drill holes in them to line up with here. It's a little over 4/10. Do I give a shit? Let's run a test fit for these bolts. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, got some Loctite on here. 47 foot-pounds or 64 Newton meters. Next issue. Will this hit anything? Will these lines clear the frickin' exhaust and the ABS? Right, now the high pressure line. Need to get this on and make sure it's not colliding with anything. So that goes to a loop for the cooler, and this one should go to the high pressure, the actual pump, the power steering pump. So from what I understand, before we get this clutch pedal in the car, we need to install a clutch stop. And what that does is what it sounds like. When you put the clutch pedal in, you have to reduce this gap here to stop it traveling too far. This nut needs to be welded on the back of here because mine doesn't already have a captive nut there. So what I've got is a 17mm bolt and two 17mm nuts. That goes in there. And then on the other side, put the nut that's going to hold everything. Sandwich it all together, like so. And then when we put the clutch pedal in, see it's not making contact here. So that's free to extend all the way. The further you wind this bolt through, the more it stops you extending the pedal all the way down. See, when I extend this, like putting my foot in to engage the clutch, it hits the stop that I've just put in. And without it, my clutch pedal will be able to extend further down. With the competition clutch, this is something you have to install to not overextend onto that pressure plate. Unfortunately, as I said before, my bracket doesn't have a captive nut welded to it, so I might have to get that welded on there. I don't have a welder here at the moment, and I don't know how to weld, but whatever. So I need to get that captive nut probably welded on here, and then you won't have to put a tool on the back. You'll just have to adjust from here, from these two. The adjustment screw, and then the nut to hold. In the meantime, I can fit the brake and accelerator pedal, and while I'm doing that, I think I might test fit this throttle cable from the EG Civic to see if it's better suited to the K-series throttle body and bracket that I have currently on it. So let's go into the interior of the car and start pulling some stuff apart and get these pedals in. Here we are under the dash. First thing we should probably get rid of is this automatic shifter cable. Okay, I guess that means we have to take off all of this. Holy shit. Okay. There we go. There's a nut on the top. So there's a bolt down in here. I just need to remove this cover and then I should have access to there. Should be able to slide this whole thing off now. Yep, there we go. So it was one on the top, two on the bottom, and just that stupid little bracket bullshit. Here we are back under the dash. I'm gonna remove this pedal box assembly. Looks like it's just a bunch of 12 mils. Okay, before we unbolt this, just way up here on the brake pedal, there's a pin that holds it against the shaft for the master cylinder, and it's got a safety clip on it that needs to be folded back straight and pulled through, and then have that holding pin pushed through the other side, and then it'll be free of the master. And we also need to remove the brake switch wire, which is on the other side over here. It's just a plug, it's pretty obvious where it goes. Okay, so there goes one half of the safety pin. There goes the other half. Now that bolt should just push out like so. Now the pedal is free from the master. Now the next thing to do is take this throttle cable off, which slides over the top and out. Cool. Now the 12 mils. Here we are right under the pedals. As you can see, there's one more bolt right there. Looks to be a 12 mil. That 12 mil bolt removed from the top of the pedal box. This should all start to slide off of here. Oh, I see. Need to push the master cylinder out the other side. Okay, so I'm just going to pull the master cylinder out on the firewall just to give me some room on those studs. Should have done this before, but oh well. Alright, one line out, 2 lines out. No, not quite. Let's drop this down. That might be enough. Let's check inside now. Uh-oh. What was that? How did the throttle cable end up back? It ended back over it. How the... Alright, there it is. It's out. Fucking piece of shit. Alright, let's get the new one. Feed it up there. Okay, I got that master cylinder completely removed, so this should just be able to slide straight up now instead of all that bullshit. Oh, how did that actually go in here? Oh, like that. Hey. Come over this way. Line up with that. Line up with that. Start slapping everything back together. Okay, this is the brake pedal here. This is through to the firewall. Okay, that looks like it's gonna line up. Stick this little sticker in. Just need to put a split pin on the back of that. Okay, let's get those last bolts on there and be done with this. That's hooked back up. So now we have a manual brake pedal and a, I guess the accelerator pedal's the same, but got another one in there regardless. Here we are on the firewall. A couple 10 mils holding this shifter bracket for the automatic. Let's see if I can reuse this plug. Don't really want that open to the elements. I just had to split this. Put a bolt in it with some 3-bond and a zip tie so that I can get this in here and not get fumes and stuff in the car. While we're here, let's remove this evap canister bullshit. Right, next up, need to remove this floor vent and get ready for running cables for the shifter. The shifter's going to need to sit here, and the holes for the shifter cables are probably somewhere underneath here is where they're going to end up going. Now I wonder how I get this out, because I really don't want to take the whole dash out. Oh. What a fucking sack of shit that was. Oh. Somewhere around here is where the shifter cable is going to go through. I think it's back in there. And that's where our shifter is going to mount. this piece here is kind of this way, which would line up pretty good with this. The grommet for the shifter cables isn't fixed. It can actually slide on here, which means I can mount this in the factory location and then change how long the cable goes from this grommet, etc, etc. Get a copy of this and start cutting some shit. Something roughly like that. This is not going to work. This is way too big a hole for the location on the CRB. I guess the RD1 sized one is a little square, which would make sense because there's basically only enough room for something that big. So let's move on to something else for now. I've test fitted the subframe really quickly on the jack just to see if I can make alterations to the firewall to run cables once the subframe's attached, and there'll be no issue there. So yeah, let's move on. Fuel rail to fuel pressure regulator, and then we'll need something. Got some banjo fittings there too. That's off the stock fuel filter, I think. Swap fuel lines for 92 to 00 Civic and Integra over here, and on this side we got the fuel pressure regulator. Okay, if you're doing a return based fuel system, which the RD1 is, you block off this one. If for a return list system, you'd leave this port open and follow the instructions. But for me, I don't need it. Let's tighten that up. Now the bottom one should be fuel return. So this will go back to the hard line to return to the tank, which I'm assuming is this one. So this fucking stupid shit on it. This side's from the fuel rail. This side's back to the fuel tank. I believe that's for a gauge, which we don't have, which I might have to get actually. There we are. Looks pretty clean. Looking good. And we'll tighten this fecker down. Here we are back at the ABS pump. I've got it mounted up and I've attached a couple of brackets that I bent on the vise. Shout out to Brian over at Hasport for answering another one of my questions on his live stream. I mentioned that the ABS unit was kind of close to the exhaust, and because this isn't a turbo manifold and because the exhaust also has its heat shield, it should be fine. So I'm not really going to worry about moving this any further, but what I am going to do is try and build a very small heat shield just for right here. That's what these two brackets are for. So let's get started on bending up some cardboard, I think. Alright, well, this is what I've got so far. I'm going to have to fold this into a radius under here. The only thing that concerns me is this point on this far edge. Will probably be touching the exhaust, I'd imagine, because that's quite far out. But I'm going to have to come up with a a way to slim this up a bit. Making some progress here, slowly bending up something out of cardboard, which then I can transfer over to actual heat material. Okay, that's going to work. So, might change something to do with these corners. Might bend these in earlier and then come out to here. But that's something I can work with once I've got a basic setup. Let's see what cuts this shit the best. I've got some metal shears here. Cuts pretty good. Now we got this freaking mess to deal with. Well, it's better than nothing. Let's get this subframe up, and I think we should probably get the engine in. So let's see how we did with clearance for the heat shield. That heat shield might hit the universal joint. Well, let's get this bolted up. Seen it before, so I'll just quickly buzz through this. Right, just gonna nip up the subframe. That is 66 foot-pounds or 90 newton meters, and it's a 19mm socket. Looks like it clears it. It's close, but it clears it. Might be time to move on to fitting the last couple of things to the engine. These are all 17s, by the way. Next up, we need to take off the charge harness because my tucked loom is actually separate to the charge harness, not like an OEM harness. So we'll get this one off, and then at some point I'll have to strip what I don't need out of it and keep what I do need out of it to run a alternator to the battery. That's the charge harness separated from the engine. Just there is a vacuum line that's not on, so I'll need that sorted. Right there is the knock sensor that I need to swap out. Knock sensor is a 27mm. So I'm just gonna feed a big socket over it with a universal. And I've just realized that the knock sensor on my K20 over there is the same as the K24, which is a problem because I need either the right plug or the right sensor. I don't really want to cut this loom up, so now I need to find a knock sensor. So this is the plug for the knock sensor, nicely labeled. It's quite large by comparison to these. So this is off the K24, and as you can see, way too big. Just pulled this off the K20 that was in the CRV, same knock sensor. What the? So now I need to find a K20 knock sensor, I guess. And if they're expensive, then I'm probably not going to find one, and just try and find a plug for a K20. Has two little ears, little tabs there, and two on the top. And the one for this loom is from a Type R. Two on the top line up, but the ones on the side don't. So I pulled the one off the K20. Sure enough, it has its tabs in the middle, so that one's going to work. The sensor itself does look different, but its height is identical. So as far as I'm aware, this one should be fine, because it's just picking up a magnetic signal or a gap in frequency between the teeth on that timing wheel, so it just needs to be close enough, and if the length's right, then it should be fine. So at least we can chuck this one in. I'll just give it a quick clean. And there we go, K20 crank position sensor installed. It's a shame about the K20 knock sensor not working, but it's not going to stop me putting in the car because at least it's on the front, so it'll be easy enough to get to. Right, let's see how close we are. Pretty close. And that's on the lowest mount. Here we go. And the nut, lock nut. All right, it's in there. We've got a gap there, which is good. The power steering line is just missing. These plugs are okay for the ABS. It's close, but it's okay. Let's have a look underneath. And there goes the gap to the transfer case at the moment. That's because I've got the engine mounts on their lowest. Alright, let's have a look at our gap now. Shit, she's pretty close, but it's gonna work. Look at that, look how close the power steering lines are. Worst case scenario, I just have to dent the power steering line. Sorry, worst case scenario, I just have to dent that heat shield on the extractors. The axle angle with the frame. How about that? Looking good. Some clearance isn't huge, but this car's going to be lifted, and I can always build a little bash plate or something. Well, here it is. Finally in the engine bay, where it's going to stay. Got that nice tucked loom in there. Got the engine mounts on the lowest bracket. What do you guys reckon? Let me know. Do we leave this cover on or off? I mean, the hybrid racing fuel line and stuff's pretty cool, fuel rail, but it looks kind of ugly. I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence a bit. Yeah, don't know. And rocker cover, obviously I'm going to paint that. I'm going to get a wrinkle finish. Was thinking just to go wrinkle black. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any opinions on what color would look good in this bay. It's kind of a pinky purple bay, so you know, Type R red would probably look a little bit strange in here. But don't know, maybe wrinkle blue. I don't know, let me know. Still waiting on a bracket that I think comes off here somewhere and comes over to here, or it might be off there. I don't know. Something like that. That should be coming from the States here hopefully pretty soon. That'll be good to get on there, and then that'll be the engine properly mounted. I mean, right now it's good and we're not making any noises, hitting anything, whereas before if I shook this, it would have hit the power steering lines on the rack. Very good. As always, thanks for watching, and I really appreciate all the likes and subscriptions. The channel is definitely starting to grow a bit faster now, which is good. Progress should start speeding up quite rapidly with this now. We only have a few things to wait on. Interior pieces from a manual RD1, so that once the shifter and everything's in there from the K series, hopefully it'll end up looking OEM and a lot more tidy than just a kind of box and cables exposed on the floor. We're also waiting on a Hub City all-wheel drive rear bracket, so that shouldn't be too far out. I think that was ordered about 3 weeks ago. So yeah, make sure you stick around if you're enjoying this K-swap stuff, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.